Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I am the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California, where I am currently under lockdown. Yes, our esteemed mayor put out a very confusing order last night. And that said, no one's allowed to leave their home, but also everyone's allowed to leave their home. And I went to go get a prescription today, and I'll tell you what, nobody was following this fucking thing. Oh boy, what a world we live in. Are you also on the edge of sanity because of insomnia and weird sleep patterns? Or is that just me? Hey, I'll tell you what, though. It's been a joy to be doing this show in quarantine, and today's episode is no exception. Today is Steve Conrad. And if you don't know who Steve is, why don't I read you his bio right now? Originally from Fort Lauderdale, Steve Conrad has been writing screenplays for over 2 decades, with his notable films including The Weatherman, The Pursuit of Happiness, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Wonder. In 2015, he started developing one of the first shows on Amazon Prime, Patriot. Though it only lasted 2 seasons, it is easily one of the best series of the last decade. His latest series, Perpetual Grace Limited, debuted on Epix last year. I can't say enough good things about Patriot. You know, I say it in this episode. I also say it a lot on this. I think I have what we'll call good taste in art. And I really include Patriot. There's a handful of shows in the last decade that have just been like, here, I'll just list what I think are some of the best shows of the last decade that include Patriot. Rectify, I May Destroy You, Halt and Catch Fire, Lodge 49, Better Call Saul, Counterpart, The Leftovers, just dramas. But it's incredible, and I would recommend everyone go out and watch it immediately. Steve New Show, Perpetual Grace Limited, I have been hoarding it, waiting for a low moment when I can watch it. But Steve is everything I hoped he would be. He's very cool, smart, interesting guy. And I won't waste any more time in this intro. Well, a little more time. If this is your first episode of Beginnings, thanks for checking out the show. I got almost 11 years worth of episodes if you want to check out others. They're all there on Spotify or at beginnings.libsyn.com. I've talked to plenty of writers and authors and actors and comedians and musicians and artists. Now, if you don't want to comb through 11 years worth of interviews, I could suggest some. What I like doing is whatever my guest is for this episode, I'll suggest some other people like that guest. So TV writers, I've talked to Damon Lindelof, Jim Gavin, who's the creator of Lodge 49, Jane Espenson, Allison Tatlock, who's a wonderful writer on Halt and Catch Fire and Better Call Saul, Amy Aniobi, who writes on Insecure, Cord Jefferson, who wrote on The Good Place and also Watchmen. I believe he just won an Emmy for Watchmen. Jessica Gao, who also won an Emmy, but for Rick and Morty, and a ton of other people. So check out those episodes. Check out some other ones. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Stitcher, plenty of other places. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. I have some amazing episodes coming up. Comics writers like Cy Spurrier and Chip Zdarsky, Tobin Sprout from Guided by Voices, Bob Nastanovich from Pavement, Ian Mackay of Fugazi, and one of the founders of Discord Records. Next week is, I think, war correspondent and leftist writer Chris Hedges. That was a wonderful talk. So stay tuned, subscribe to the show. But for now, let's talk to Steve. Chicago?
I am.
How long have you lived there?
I moved to Chicago when I was 18, so quite a while. Greater than 30 years now.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. I don't like to ask about like career stuff. I'm not that interested in it, but how do you have like a screenwriting career and
from Chicago?
Yeah, from Chicago.
Well, that may be why I have one, because I just the few extended periods I had to live and work in Los Angeles, I found myself really challenged to be creative, and I couldn't tell you why, and I stopped caring to find an answer. I just knew it was easier for me in Chicago. I think it's got something to do with the tight circle of friends who aren't in the movie business, who, they share stories from their life that don't relate to the business, and it allows me then to be able to have an insight into the conflicts and narratives, the long narratives of people's lives who constitute our audience, and I'm happy for it. It's a tough town. It's true of the winners and it's true of a lot else, but 30 plus years, you start to understand it a little bit, and understanding a metropolis like that, and so far as anybody can, that's a feat, and that gives you quite a lot when you are able to say at the end of the day, what are politicians worth? What are police worth? What are teachers worth? What are what is an alderman worth? Like, it's you get it figured out.
Yeah, I mean, look, my wife and I moved here middle of 2017, and we absolutely hate it. Just have not liked, in the pandemic it's a little better because we're not around the people, but but it is just like the minute that either of us has enough buzz, juice, I don't know what word you want, to be able to have a career and not live here, we're moving back to New York.
Well, I've never had either buzz or juice. And the lights are still on somehow, so you can do it, especially today. You can do it, yeah.
But you have both a steady career and a creative and interesting career. Like you make good things.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah. That's part of the business plan. We in as much as you can control that, which is not a lot because it's not up to you. You can only have a goal and a command over what has gone before you, right, that you had nothing to do with. And by command, I just mean like you are able to assess the quality of it and have some sense of how that was arrived at. I have a very small company in Chicago. There's 4 of us, and it dawned on us all one day at lunch that if you want to be in this business for greater than 30 years, you've got to. You can't just be glad to be there. Like you have to amount to something that contributes, like a filmmaker that contributes to the art form. And if you look around at the guys who are in their 60s and 70s who are still material to the art form, they're masters of the art form. And everybody knows the same set that I'll mention here, but it's the Coens and it's Scorsese and it's Tarantino and Paul and Wes Anderson. I mean, they're going on 20 plus years easily of being very, very good at this thing, and it seems to be the only way you're able to hang in there. And so it's a goal of ours someday to count, in a small number of people who really love the art form and take it seriously and want to contribute to it. So I appreciate that very much. When you measure the thing and say it's good, like that means we did what we were trying to do. And I can tell you it doesn't often come up when you're in that great group of people that you need in order to be able to pay to make a television show or a film. It's a shame, but very seldom does anybody really use that word as a directive to what your job as a filmmaker is, to come back with something that can be characterized that way. It doesn't seem to factor in the equation, and that's certainly true of films these days. And
I mean, moving out here, I thought I kind of knew what the business was, and then we moved out here, and I'm like, oh, I had no idea. You know, it just seems like if you come in here, I found this to be very sociopathic, and I wonder if maybe like living in Chicago has allowed you to escape that in some way.
It has, for sure. And I know just what you mean. It can be a full-time job just dealing with attitudes here in Los Angeles. It's helped me tremendously. But if I wasn't a writer, I don't think I could pull it off. Like there has to be in a writer's life a period where he socks away and comes back with something that didn't exist before. And it's easier in large part in Chicago to just keep my head down and write. I mean, writing doesn't come easily to me. I have friends who write, and that's truer for them than it is for me. It's sort of tough. I don't have a real process. I just have weird rituals that sometimes allow the thing to come, and sometimes they don't. But it's tough. So I the rest of my life has to work because that part of my life doesn't give me a whole lot of peace. So I just couldn't exist in Los Angeles.
Yeah. It's I find the but here's the thing. Do you enjoy writing? I mean, even, as difficult as it is, do you actually enjoy having something?
I enjoy finishing.
Something?
Yeah, I enjoy being done. The hardest part is scratch. Just trying to hone in on something that is going to add up ultimately in one way or another. Is this going to add up? Is there a denouement to all of this energy that makes it feel singularly satisfying, which is really the trick of writing, is that you get to the ending and you feel like this is precisely the only ending. Right, and everything that comes before that really constitutes whether that can be true or not. So you're flying blind so often, and I wish that someone had told me when I was starting out that a good day is 5 pages in the trash and 1 page in the laptop, and that's okay.
Yeah. I found that to be in the little time I've been doing this comparatively. That it is there's something though I still enjoy. The excruciating part is the putting it together. I still enjoy the actual act of like putting the words on the page.
Yeah. Well, when you come up with a way to articulate a feeling that people recognize but haven't really been able to put a name to, that's a great feeling. It is very different than the writing of film and television it's different. My guess is it's very different from writing a novel, very different from writing poetry, from writing music. Like it has its own set of principles, and it's got its own power, and it's got its own brick walls, and it's got its own fault lines, and people talk about it like someone's figured out how to do it. Like you hear maxims and principles, all of which I throw out. But for some reason, there's a group of writers who feel like they can talk about this craft like it can be understood and passed down along certain lines. Like you'll hear, don't use voiceover. And well, what about Goodfellas? There's an exception to every single principle someone will throw at you to say, well, starting in the middle, that's a good one. It doesn't always work. So I never hear novelists talk about the 5 principles of writing a novel. Like it has a more expansive and a robust way of meaning more than one thing.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because it's to write or to create something is to live in a very specific brain state, and it's not constant, and it's just something that happens that you. There's no like you said, you have some certain rituals that you kind of get into. I don't know if there's a way. I don't know if there's a generalized way, right? Like you said, and everyone wants there to be. But I think there's also like this kind of like cross purpose with like the commercial aspects of this, right? I think for certain commercial things there are rules, but
that's where all those principles come from. Like they're aimed at the commerce of the job, so they ought to be very carefully scrutinized and then very seldom accepted, because the other weird thing about this business is nobody knows what they're doing on the other end of it. Like why some pictures click for audiences and why some don't, it remains a mystery. So I'm skeptical of anybody who feels like they've got the secret recipe for how to make a hit.
Yeah.
So it's weird. It's weird that way too. Like you're being taught to apply principles that will create a larger audience, and that is demonstrably not true. But nevertheless, the studio executives will force the application of those principles as if it always has that reward, and it never does. Yeah. Incidentally, it might, because if everybody does it, people are going to go see 2 movies a year for sure. Anyway, the exploration of it all, the being active in terms of trying to find the fun in the thing. It's no fun to obey rules.
No.
So that's an under sort of purposed way of thinking about what we do, and there's a reason why we're all in this business and we're not in the army. There is a promise of like magic in it, right? That brings us all together. There's so much hard work involved, but if there can't be that fun, that sense of fun in the discovery of a thing that can be dazzling or beautiful, then we should be doing something different. Mm-hmm. So a lot of jobs can feel like that. We got kind of lucky with Patriot, because Patriot hit a little bit of a slipstream in that it had just enough of what the studio considered to be familiar action, like the quotient of action, and the way the series trafficked in the spy genre gave it enough of a set of rails that it allowed us to then really roll up our sleeves to try to have as much fun as we could.
I mean, you're from Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
That wasn't. You're from Fort Lauderdale. That's where my sister lives right now.
Yeah,
and it seemed kind of I don't know what's a good word, flat to me when I was there.
Do you know Florida Man?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Florida Man. Only there could such bizarre things happen to people who have no idea what they're doing to each other.
Do you know why that is? Like I've talked to some people.
Yeah, I do. Oh. It's the climate, and it people go there to have it easy. They leave parts of the country that have challenging climates and that have density that's challenging to them, and they're brought there by the promise of the Jimmy Buffett lifestyle that doesn't exist, and you're then surrounded by people who are expecting things to be easy, and they never are. So it creates now some of my very best friends are from Florida, and my parents chose to raise me there, and I did get a lot out of it. But life's not easy, and work is not easy, and I'm glad that I moved to Chicago at an age where I could still look around and learn, because Chicago might be the opposite of that energy, where the putting your head down and working a full day is that you take that for granted there. And then the other lovely thing about Chicago is that the recreation of the city is artful and really rewarding to somebody who likes that part of life. And that's sort of absent from the scene. There's not a lot of wet t-shirt contests in Chicago.
Seems like Chicago is a place that is art for art's sake. There's so much.
It's true. We have, plays that are written and performed here without the expectation that they'll go anywhere else, or just for Chicagoans. And we have a music scene that you can say the same thing about it. And, one of my best friends there is Tony Fitzpatrick, who's one of the world's great fine artists. And he is a linchpin in our art scene, which is really healthy and internal and potent. And Chicago's great if you can stand the weather. It's pretty cool.
So how did your parents end up in Florida?
Well, my mom went down there to run the very early version of the Head Start program, which was encouraging diversity in public school systems. And my dad's parents moved down there. You got me. Neither one of them was what you would consider your garden variety Floridian, which I'm grateful for, because they allowed me to recognize that there's this greater world out there. I mean, here's what you might say about where I grew up in Florida. It's really roughneck. It's not exactly redneck, but there's plenty of that too. But it's really roughneck, and it's really male in a way that I think limits it to being anything else. Like, there's kids fight all the time, and they play sports all the time, and they do very little else. Guys are always out in public with their shirts off. It's not. Anyway, someday you look around and just go, man, I just like to be a little more serious than this, and just a little bit more. And so that probably elementally made me love movies and music and stuff, because I didn't feel really super comfortable in shared spaces there. I felt better like being the only Elvis Costello fan in Fort Lauderdale. going to see a show of his in Miami where almost nobody came, and he was a sensation to me, and I couldn't believe that there weren't 100 people who could pick up what he was doing in that whole space. And same thing is true. I saw the Replacements and nobody was there, and he's. But that's true of any young person who wants to be an artist. I think there's a period of isolation until you have to go looking. Like, you have to leave. You've got to go to Oz. You gotta leave. But then there's William Faulkner, who didn't leave, and a few people are better at it than him. So there's always exceptions. But I knew I had to, and the light went off in Chicago for me when I got there. And then I met real writers, and I met real filmmakers, and there was the music video scene that was pretty experimental and fun there. So there's just tools and energy and optimism and the collectivity that you ultimately need to make films. It's one of the coolest things about making movies is it's not a one-man job. It just can't be. It's impossible to do that by yourself. And so therein lies one of the realizations that can help you be good at it, is you realize, well, because this then must be a society, it has to be. What if maybe you should get good at building that thing? Like, that's something that we've endeavored to be good at my small companies. When we, on our TV series, the holdover of all of our fellow filmmakers and ensemble actors, that everybody goes on to the next thing together, which I think a lot of what people call the tone of our thing is attributable. It's the sound that collection of people makes together. And if you lost anybody elemental from it, it might shift.
Yeah, that's something important that I don't think there are rules for doing this well, but I think one of the keys, not the only one, right? But one of them is having that group of people that is resonating on the same frequency together.
Yeah. Well, you get something really great out of it, because you realize that you're not alone, and like, that's just a good feeling to have in life. But then you get this really beautiful ancillary a gift to, I didn't know Kurtwood Smith before Patriot. Kurtwood plays Leslie Claret, and he's one of America's great actors. But somehow I thought that he might respond to the way we do things, and I sought him out. And then the thing I learned is he not only gets what we do, he masters it. Like, he is the very best vehicle to transmit our particular weirdness on Patriot and Perpetual Grace. And like, I somehow knew that about him. So when we met, we had already kind of known each other in that weird way, where it just felt like there was a little bit of a society already and it's true of Terry O'Quinn. Mm-hmm. It's true of my brother, who I am able to utilize. Chris Conrad plays Dennis McLaren and New Leaf and the Patriot and Perpetual Grace, respectively. So that adds up to fun too. Like, when you feel like you're in a little bit of a gang, that there's a shared sense of,
Yeah, I think that's the thing that, like, I've found to be particularly difficult out here is in that sociopathy, you never feel safe. And I've never understood people who think that you create or you make your best work when you don't feel safe. Like, every story I've heard about Saturday Night Live seems terrible. It seems like everyone is afraid all the time. And I can't remember a point in time where I felt like I made something good, whether I've written a song or a script or whatever, when I felt afraid.
Yeah. That's I think a really sound way to think about it. I say that to the actors all the time. Like, my job is to make you feel safe and then brave. Like, that's all the writing is there to do, and then that's all the hum of the set is there to do. Why I'm very, very happy about the state of things in television right now, although it's not to be taken for granted that this will remain the case, that there is ambition in the plan. The feat of making sure that each episode is very sound and functional, and then if you do that well, you have a chance to be good. That is a feat that requires several different skills and focus points. Like, you have to have a set that, over 120 days, there has to be peace and there has to be safety. And after that, then you do the small things, like you create like good cheer if you're smart, and then the camaraderie that comes from a baseline level of respect that each of us gives the other. The people who don't cotton to the way that we do things at Patreon Perpetual Grace, they don't come back to the show, and anybody who does will, and anybody could do the math. There's a trick that a filmmaker taught me about hiring actors that said, he said, make sure you see that they've worked with directors more than once, and if they haven't, there's usually a reason. And it's a really good little shorthand for figuring out whether somebody knows how to cooperate.
So, when you were in Florida, was there ever a conscious thought, I have to get out of here? Like, I'm from Pennsylvania, and I just knew that, like, there was this inchoate kind of feeling in me that I didn't, as much as I loved my parents, I did not want to live the lifestyle that they were living. This kind of like middle-class suburban, nothing wrong with that lifestyle, but I didn't want to be here in Pennsylvania. There was something stifling about it, but it wasn't a conscious thought to me. I just knew I wanted to get out, that I was allergic to this in some way. Did you have a conscious thought, or was it more of this kind of like feeling like I had when I was growing up?
I don't remember ever feeling differently than this just wasn't going to be home for me, and being very hopeful that if I left at 17 or 18, then my real life would start, which is not a healthy way to look at it, because that's the setting where your loved ones live and your first set of intimacies are there. And then also you learn that people are the same all over the place. Like, if you go outside any city for 5 minutes, there's rednecks, and it's true of Montreal, it's true of Miami. So you get that discovery too, that people really aren't all that different, but they're different by very important degrees. And I think that impulse that you felt to go and find a place where you might be more easily appreciated for being more authentically yourself is really where it's what drives you from one place to another. And there was a moment I remember when you're very young and you're just learning, you absorb so much and everything seems sort of profound, and you are respectful, if not daunted by it all. But then there comes a day when you've absorbed enough and you're free to read a book, Old Man and the Sea, and you're free to say, I don't think this is very good. And you just know that you're applying your own set of what you love about the art form. Like you have your own idea about what's phony, and you have your own idea about what's true. And then one day when you know you can't fake it anymore. Like I don't like that book. And it feels weird to say that, but I don't. But knowing that it doesn't work for me, that it doesn't cast a spell, allows me then to know what it is that I think is good about the art form, relative to other ways of doing it, and then you have a little. So when you start to turn things away a little bit, and when you start to say that I think this is fake, or there's like I said, difference between maybe pop music and rock music and rock music and indie music and indie music and experimental music. You're narrowing in on something, and you're declining to do certain things. So it's the next phase from absorbing everything. You start to decline. Like I know that there's things that I just don't do. Like we don't do gore. We do very little gunplay. I don't think I could ever make films that trafficked in that, only because for whatever reason it wasn't the art I was really, really, truly drawn to. The art that was most meaningful for me outside of school, the ones that you keep and share, like those just didn't have that quotient to them. And I like John Steinbeck and I don't like Ernest Hemingway, and that's okay. That's everybody is going to fall into their particular way of measuring what the art form can do. And the coolest thing I learned is just you can't debate it. Like I don't want to have a conversation about why I don't like Old Man in the Sea. I just know I don't, and I know somebody else does, and we can leave it at that.
There is a certain spell, though, that I don't know about spell if that's the right word, but let's just say spell, that some kind of like I don't know about mainstream author, but that like a canonical author like Hemingway has, that all of culture says this is the right author to like, or all of culture like I find this really difficult about. I found this really difficult about growing up in Pennsylvania, where like if I liked whatever indie rock band, Yo La Tengo or something like that, there were very few people around me, and I think the same thing for you, right? Where you liked Elvis Costello, The Replacements in Florida, and you said you went to like an Elvis Costello show and there was like barely anyone there, which is blows my mind. I assume that's in the 80s or the late 70s or something like that.
Yeah, well, you could walk into a high school cafeteria and find the artist in the room because he's probably eating by himself.
Yeah, but like the way, like, I guess the question I have is, how do you escape? How do you, I'm trying to reconstruct in some way. How did I escape? It's not a bad fate, but just like the fate of like liking Hemingway, right? The thing where just like someone says you're supposed to like Hemingway, and then I read Hemingway and I'm like, you're right, I do like it. Instead, I read Hemingway, I'm just like, it's fine. Like, it's not bad. I'm just like, it doesn't resonate.
My opinion about that is it's what makes it so valuable is that it really can't be faked. Like you feel it hits you, or it doesn't. And if it does, you should be glad that something did. And it's good you find it, you love that. You don't have to denigrate the rest of it. Those hit people the other way.
Right.
I mean, if I pick that book up on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, I might love it. But nevertheless, that's the way it went down. And the only reason I bring it up is that I think it really helps shape you as an artist to always be reading, to always be watching film, but then also to apply this level of discernment to it, where you can say, like, I can take very little from the way this is done. But for us, it would be, we get so much more out of manga on Patriot than we do Mission Impossible. We get almost nothing out of the Mission Impossible series. And I like them, but when I watch them, I don't watch them as a filmmaker. I watch them as a fan.
Right.
And I understand how hard it is to pull off what they pull off. And it's an accomplishment, and they deserve all their success. If I tried to make a movie like that, I would fail because my heart wouldn't be in it. And that's it. That's just the bottom line. Tom Cruise's heart is in that, and you can tell. And that might be the single explanation for why they're so successful, is that energy comes across, and it's to be respected. I just know that it's got nothing to do with what I do. And I'm glad I never had to learn that the hard way. And I think when you grow up in like a space that doesn't have on a daily basis a delivery to you of what really good pop art can do for you, that you find it yourself, and then it means a lot more to you, and then it becomes very precious. like the writers you love, they become really precious and worth fighting for. And then the music you love, the good thing is it leads to other bands, and then it doesn't have to remain narrow or even finite. It's still to this day, like the way I think about music, I know it has a foundation in the music that wasn't trying to be on the radio back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. But I think it takes a certain kind of confidence to, I don't know about go against conventional wisdom, but let's just shorthand and say go against, in quotes, conventional wisdom. And I'm wondering if you were that confident when you were growing up.
See, but that's I think the point that I guess I realize that you just don't control that at all. It's just you make the sound that comes out of your mouth. And
some people don't, though, but that's the thing. I've met a lot of people who, in like very quiet moments, they'll admit they didn't like, let's just say Hemingway as an example. But if they were pressed in a public setting, they would just kind of fold and be like, I love that.
When I was super broke, I started out, I got work pretty young. And then after that, it just dried up to desperation. And I took a job for Disney writing direct-to-TV a movie about the Seven Dwarfs. And man, I just needed money so bad, and I just needed it now. So this was the only job I could get. And I had to go in and take a meeting about it, and I had to talk about how the Seven Dwarfs, they have to beat a giant in a fight, and then they discover teamwork is the only way. The only way to defeat this giant. And I just knew I couldn't do it. And I don't mean that I couldn't spiritually do it, because I could spiritually do it. Because I needed money, which is its own kind of spiritual need. But they knew that I couldn't do it because my heart wasn't in it. So I didn't even get that job. But that's the last time I ever really tried to contour the natural thing that gets on the page into, the way that I would write about teamwork today would be the way that team assembles in Patriot, which is because of a uniform need for these other people to hold on to somebody else because they can't stand up anymore. And like that, the dwarves weren't going to give me the chance to say that, I think.
I mean, are your parents a kind of singular people? I guess what I mean by that, like, are they, what are their personalities like? Are they assured in their personalities?
Well, my dad, he liked good things, and I don't mean cars and clothes. I mean like Monty Python. Like I remember him in the days before the internet. He bought every episode of Monty Python, and then he had to buy the European VHS version to be able to play them in our household. And I remember specifically it cost $180. This is in like 1984, and he said when the package came and he opened it and we started to watch it, he said some things are worth what you pay for them. And I've always remembered that. I like that way of appreciating something like that. So my dad, I don't know. He had a discerning sense of what made movies good, and that somehow, it got through to me as I sat there next to him. But my mom was an English teacher, and so there was always some sort of poetic way of looking at almost anything that became, the way that we talked about the world, which I think, just constitutes the way things occur to you and what you see when you see the world around you. But like my dad liked Steve Martin a lot. He loved The Jerk, and The Jerk's pretty great. Like you could watch The Jerk now and say, man, that's Charlie Chaplin of that era. And realizing that art form can be that fun and that loose, but then also be really very, very good.
Yeah.
I got that from my dad for sure. The first movie, he took me to see Billy Jack. I don't expect general audiences to call that to mind, but Billy Jack was a violent sort of exploitation, but its heart was in the right place for sure, and a really good leading man who directed it and wrote it. But it was R-rated, and I think it was 5, and things were different back then. but my first experience on the big screen was Billy Jack. And Billy Jack is a quiet hero who only fights when he has to, and then he wins. But there's always a cost, and it tears him to pieces. And one day I was watching Patriot, and I thought, man, that guy, this makes so much sense. Like this is like Billy Jack. And I thought, man, you really are a sum of all the things you've seen. And that is it. And that probably amounts to more than film school might. Like with the things that got in there and stayed in there, that you didn't, they came to you and not the other way around. The incidental delight you found in being confronted with something you didn't expect, right? Like Elvis Costello, I found a cassette tape in the back of the school bus that had been stepped on. It was barely functional. It was armed forces. And I thought his name was great and peculiar, and I just put it into my Walkman, and that's how I found that. But it was on the floor. Nobody told me. But then somehow, like the cassette tape with a footprint on it that I had to tape to make work, I think I willed that to be the thing that impressed me because of the weirdness of the way it found me.
Yeah.
Like there was some magic in it that I was open-minded about.
I mean, is that just a quirk of your brain or your personality that you're curious and open-minded?
Well, who can say? I like trying and failing. I don't like the failing part, but I like the trying part, because an artist who doesn't take a shot, like you watch Werner Herzog's movies and you think, just there's nothing faint-hearted about this artist. Like he is always reaching as far as he can reach, and I just admire that in a person. So the films that do that, I just admire. Like Wes Anderson, I admire the undertaking so much, because if he doesn't show up for work, the thing's not going to work if he's not there. And that's not true of every film, and it's not true of every TV series. You could grab someone from craft services and they could probably finish directing the episode for some TV shows. Not true of Wes's movies. And those guys that I mentioned just a little while ago, they that's what makes their films singular, because they are singularly attributed to their own way of looking at the world. And there are writers and filmmakers who just don't care to be counted among that number. They've got another goal, and that's why there's more than one movie, which is a really good thing.
I mean, how did you... It seems like you came from, like, I guess, a middle-class background or so.
Definitely. Middle-class suburbs, yeah.
In Florida, nowhere near this industry at all. Did you move to Chicago thinking, like, I want to make films and make TV? Did you just go there wanting to escape Florida in some way?
Well, I just knew that there was there was a place to sit where the conversations you overheard were just keener and nicer and sweeter, and maybe they could be appreciated more in the sense of, I'm glad that these people are around me, thinking these thoughts and fighting these fights in their lives. And I for some reason, I just couldn't pick up that frequency in where I grew up. And it's there. I mean, there's artists who live there. There's a guy named Billy Corbin who makes films in Miami, and they're good. He never left. Harmony Korine works down there now, and it can be done. Just it wasn't working for me. I think it's really simple. I think you just want. I thought the things I could do that were pretty good couldn't be appreciated there, and like the thoughts or the things that I thought were funny, I couldn't get a laugh out of anybody. And I was not alone though, because I live with Chris Conrad, he's one of today's best character actors, and he's in everything I do. So Chris is younger by 18 months, and so we had a lot of shared friendships and shared experiences, and the set of movies that we loved, they're the same. And Chris knew forever that he was going to be an actor and a performer, and he moved to Chicago when I moved to Chicago, and Chris started to study improv, and then they just started to work in the scene while I was in school. So he was doing that, and I wanted to be a part of that, and I felt like I had some tools in the toolkit. Like I could always get a group of people to come along if and have fun doing something. Like I could do that when I was younger, and I realized that was an important part of the job. And then I looked around and realized that that wasn't always the case when you work on something. There can be a lot of indifference, a lot of intolerance, a lack of ambition, and then there can be on the set. I remember being on a set, a TV show, and the director's yelling at somebody, and I thought, man, that's just weird. Like, grown man yelling at another grown man about a prop, and well, it's so foreign to what we do. We have the coolest little result of what I consider to be just a group of people who are really good. It's got nothing to do with me. There was a day on Perpetual Grace Limited where Ben Kingsley had to do a pretty long monologue in a school. He's kidnapping his adversaries' children, and he's trying to make them believe that he's their actual father on a Father's Day. And he has a 2-page monologue that's crazy. I looked over at my monitors, and every single member of our ensemble who was in town was standing at my monitor because they came we were in Santa Fe, and they came to this other town, Las Cruces, which was a 2-hour drive, just to watch Ben do what he did. And I remember walking over to Ben and saying, hey, there's some of the gangs here, is that cool? There's a real crowd over there. And he said, I would have it no other way. Like he appreciated that they came to watch him work. And when he finished the monologue in one take, there was, the applause that was given to him from the other room was something he heard because there were 15 people there. We have that. It's a part of the way we work on a daily basis. And trying to keep us all together is a feat. Like so much time passes between, the finish of the last thing and then trying to get another studio to give us money to make another one. I worry that everybody's just going to get flung out there into the world and they can't keep it together. But I will keep my fingers crossed and I'll keep writing.
So, I mean, it seems like you did have an ally, your brother, growing up, and that you guys reinforced each other in some way.
Yeah, he's a really discerning guy and a super talent. And I remember him telling me that he thought I was really good. And it made a difference to me. Like that mattered. And to this day, he does that for me too. Like if he has to go out and then make real make believe, so he just takes it from there. It's a really nice relationship. It's true of all of our actors, but Chris, he's been doing that with me for a very long time. But there isn't a person in whom I have greater confidence when that is a part of the job. You hand it over and you give them the time they need to be safe and brave, and then they take it from there. And he's really, I feel a very strong sense of confidence when Chris is taking it from me and doing it. We're trying really hard to find a show where Chris can be, the number one on the call sheet.
But this is what I'm going to say is reductive. But you tell me if any of it resonates. It seems like the thing that you guys maybe were lacking in Florida, you found once you moved to Chicago and once you started making things.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, the point I was just making, which I don't even know how I happened into, which was to say you look around and you're not alone. I was saying the converse about how I felt when I was a kid in Florida. I even specifically mentioned eating alone in the cafeteria. Like that kid, there's a hunger for belonging that he or she is not satisfying the easy way, which is generally at that age by conforming.
Yeah,
and that person's going to live with that hunger for belonging through that really rotten period and then he or she's going to go find it, and then it will mean something to them. So, but there are people who leave Los Angeles for the very same reason, and then they find it somewhere else. One of the places we work a lot is Nashville, Tennessee, because we do the music for the series, and that's where we're headquartered musically. That town is filled with people who showed up looking for something, and then they find it or they don't, but they're coming from somewhere else because there's something in the air there that's going to make them feel at home. That's true of Chicago in the Midwest. Like it's a hub for kids who feel like they need speed and challenge. Kids from the suburbs of Iowa City and Joplin, Missouri, like they go to Chicago. And so Chicago is a destination for a certain kind of person who can't find a boyfriend in Joplin because the boys in Joplin don't have good taste. I don't even know why I'm talking about Joplin. But anywhere USA, to feel like no one likes the way you look, probably pretty common. And the weird, beautiful sense that there's someone out there who does, they just don't live in your town. Like you got to leave and then you'll intersect somehow. Winding up feeling like our group has ensemble qualities all the way down. And the ensemble nature of it all, it's really the thing I think everybody's looking for. It's why people try to make bands work for that same reason, and it's really hard. There's 3 or 4 other people materially having to abide by the same single decision, and it's challenging. But being hungry for people around me who share the same goal and then can have fun when you accomplish it. The other movie that I remember watching very early was the Disney Robin Hood, and I'll be damned if that also doesn't have a lot to do with. There's really very good music in it. There's a gang around Robin Hood that loves and supports him during his hard time in the forest, and he's not alone, and like John's not alone that same way in their songs. And I think, man, everything I do is based on the first 2 movies I ever watched. Could that be true? Maybe it is. And I think, well, I guess I'm doing okay. Dog Day Afternoon was a big influence on me, and then the Robin Williams Popeye just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Just, I don't even know. Like, what? There's no story. You can't take your eyes off of it. It's so bold. It's a mess, but it's so beautiful. That movie, I think, I would encourage any filmmaker to just check out the audacity on display of that movie, and the magic moment where the studio leaves you alone enough to come back with something like that. It's going to happen once in a lifetime, but there is real talent and bravado on display in that movie.
Wait, why did Altman? That's Altman, right? Why did he want to make Popeye?
He got me. I'm glad he did, though. But he wasn't the first director that they picked for that one, and I think he probably wanted to make it because he saw that finished product in his mind and thought this is going to be worth capturing. The musicality of it is really very beautiful. Harry Nilsson wrote the score, and it's really unto itself very good. I don't know that the movie was a sensation when it came out. The score is kind of one tempo and a little maybe morose sounding, but it couldn't be more beautiful. I think Altman wanted to try to master that genre, which I would like to someday. Making a musical, we're making a stop motion musical for AMC right now, and it's 24 minutes, so it's episode by episode of 24-minute runs, and that it's been fun. I watched Popeye just the other night because we're making a musical, and I'm making the stop motion show because I want to make a musical, and maybe it was that simple for him. It's tricky, the amount of coordination and the amount of. One of the cool things about the musical, and it was true of Patriot in some respects, is that you have to have done so much of the really heavy lifting before you get there, because the actors have to sing they have to sing in camera to material that's already been created. And you don't, generally you're standing there on the day trying to get lightning in a bottle based on this really simple matter of a script, and everything else is just, you got to control it. But the musical, you have to figure it out before. And you have to march through it according to a certain plan that you might discover on the day doesn't work. It's a real high wire act, which is why I'm drawn to it.
I find them really difficult. I've written a couple short ones, some that I that filmed and some that I did on stage at UCB in New York. And the balancing, having enough songs, enough good songs, and enough plot, or not too much plot that people can follow and that the song can fit in, is maybe one of the most difficult things I've ever done.
Well, I agree with that, and I've even pinpointed the biggest divot in the musical for a filmmaker is the 3 seconds after the song's over, like when the note is gone, you have to start over.
Uh-huh.
And you generally don't have to do that. It's usually a bullet, shot out of a gun, a film narrative. But the musical has this huge lift and then a downer right afterwards, and you've got to accommodate that down set of moments.
Yeah.
And then watching people sing's weird. Like it's just when they're not on a stage and they're not. It's just kind of weird. Like their mouths are wide open, and it doesn't always make you feel really good in the audience. Like watch Grease, and you just think about the amount of people whose mouths are wide open in the same shot, and it makes you feel weird. But the magic song that deserves to be in a musical. It's funny, we made a list of the ones that we thought were really very, very good, and not even just musicals, but what's the best song that was ever written for a movie? What's the best song that's ever been in a musical? The two different ways that could be used, I think Knocking on Heaven's Door from Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the Dylan song, written specifically for that movie. That's probably the best song ever written for a movie. But I think the best musical song, my favorite, would be Where Is Love and Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist.
I've never seen it.
Well, you don't even need to see it to listen to the song. It's really good. It's Carol Reed who did The Third Man and Odd Man Out. I mean, Carol, out of nowhere, makes a musical, and it's great. So, yeah, check out Oliver Twist. It's the Carol Reed's Oliver Twist is fantastic. You've seen parts of it, and you just don't know that that's what it was. Like the kids chanting gruel when they're in the orphanage cafeteria. That movie, it's funny. It's like nobody makes movies like Wes Anderson. So I don't mean to say that there was some sort of antecedent to Wes, but there's a delight in the inception of a beautiful, wild idea that movie has, and it makes me really, really love it. But there's a really plaintive ballad in the middle of it called Where Is Love, and that's my favorite song ever written for a musical.
Do you think it was again, reductive question, you tell me if any of it resonates. Do you think it was this search, both being reinforced by your brother and also the search for belonging, that I'm always curious, here's the parenthetical to this. I'm always curious about people who, like myself, didn't come from a background where this job was like a good idea, right? Or was something that anyone thought I could do. And if you don't come from that, I'm curious about the things that, if you don't come from a background like where your parents are famous actors or famous screenwriters, how you get into this or how you think you should do it. And it, what I'm seeing from talking to you is like it seems like it's both like the fact that your brother reinforced you, that you both reinforced each other in some way, and that there was also this search for that belonging that kind of propelled you.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been down on my hometown, and in some respects, it's really stupid to try to say that was my complete experience, and I sure don't mean it, because the second you finished, provoking that idea for me, I thought, my dad he literally said to me, being writers are, people will tell you it's a real gamble, and that it's not a safe job. And he said, but there are stories written on the walls of caves. Like, this is a good thing to create and sell because people need it. You don't have to do a sales job on someone to get them to want to hear a good story. It's part of the human appetite. And my dad said, in that respect, it's a really safe job. Just try to be really good at it, because the tricky part is that there's a way of looking at that job like it's cush if you get good at it. And that never occurred to me, that side of it. But that push from my dad to say, go out and do that. It's smart. Just remember, you got to try really hard to understand what you're doing. Like, I got that in my hometown from my dad. And as far as my mom was concerned, like she was always supportive of the quality of anything that I did. Now, I started out playing the drums, so my poor mom and dad had to listen to me playing drums to my Kiss records. And my mom would just come in and she would say, that sounds very good. Always. Never asking me to stop. So I got that in my hometown. I got nothing but, I mean, we had, complexities in my household that all the boys had to get over. But generally speaking, we did get that magic thing from two well-intentioned and sound people who said, you can go and do this thing. You can be it. And don't look back, but try to be good.
Yeah.
My mom, I joined the Kiss Army when I was little, and I don't know if your audience knows exactly what that means, but when I was a kid, I went to Catholic school, and there was word on the street that they were satanic, and I don't know, but my mom was a teacher there, so I asked her if I could join the Kiss Army, which cost about $7, and it just meant you were a super fan and you got patches and stuff, and so my mom, she didn't instinctively say no. She looked into it and she listened to their records and she thought it sounded a lot like soul. She knew that they were making pretty safe music. Like, they definitely weren't experimenting with their music. It was a shtick, but the songs had grooves and they were pretty good. And she said, this seems just fine to me. So she let me join the Kiss Army, and so that was a part of what, the set of gifts I got when I was little, I got in my hometown from my mom and dad. I didn't leave there to escape my family. Like that, I wish I could have taken them with me.
Yeah.
It was mostly a mindset of masculinity that I depicted in The Patriot first season credits, of the hyper masculinity of BMX and guns, and it's the way I grew up, and I don't. It seems like a real trap if you find your identity in that sort of easy way of measuring what a man is. Like that. That seemed like something I had to get away from.
Yeah, but it seems like you had a pretty open family.
I did. Yeah. Yes, they were smart people. In abundance. I have two other brothers beside Chris who are also artful and cool and funny. But funny was the thing for us. Like my dad didn't stay at home a lot, and then he left when we were pretty little, but then he'd come back and then leave, and it just was tricky. And the way we made each other feel okay about being home was we made each other laugh. And Chris Conrad everybody knows this who's seen him work. He's funny as hell. But my other brothers are just as funny. And the way you got over at the house was to be funny. So that developing that muscle as a way to survive, like living together, I think that gave Chris, so many gifts. Like I get calls every other day from someone asking me if they can hire him, and I'll say, well, what do you like about him? He's like, he's funny and serious. Like, he can do those two things. He can do that Charlie Chaplin thing. And I thought, well, that's nothing new to Chris. That he's been doing that. Expertly forever. Funniest person I've ever met.
Is that it? Are you guys reinforce kind of like, if your dad's coming in and out a little bit, right? Is it that you're kind of like, you have to be a little self-sufficient and kind of also like reinforce each other?
Yeah, and you have to be you have to be the thing. Like when dads do that, when dads leave and come back more than once, the coming back is a drag. Like the coming back's never good. The first one, you believe it. Mm-hmm. The second time a dad comes back to a family, it makes the children feel the opposite of the way the dad thinks they're going to feel, because they only really now just feel inconsistency and chaos and failure. And once you start counting 2, you go, well, it's going to be 7 or 8. Why is this going to be the second time's not going to be the thing? And then it wasn't. So to find some stability in terms of what you can count on every day in a household, you do have to turn to each other, and then we did that with our mom. So, but kind of strange, because it's 4 teenage boys, and my mom was pretty young when she has, and she never really seemed to be middle aged. But 4 teenage boys and this beautiful woman, like it was a good way to learn about the world, and it was a good place to be, especially in those days when you found yourself spending more time together because there were fewer things to do in isolation. And
I mean, I think it is. I feel lucky. I know that there's this kind of is it Walter Benjamin, when in The Age of Mechanical Reproduction, he talks about that. I think about this a lot, that every time there's like a new technological advancement, yes, there's bad things that come out of it, but also there's good things. Right, like when there was mechanical reproduction, yes, you no longer have the buzz of seeing a painting in person and feeling that energy there. But now it's kind of democratized, and anyone can see a postcard with a painting on it. It's the same kind of thing. Like, I feel lucky that I grew up before the internet.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of good things that have come out of it, but like,
well, I remember when it first started you knew it wasn't going anywhere, and I remember thinking, this is great, because there's not going to be any more rednecks anymore, because everybody's going to be able to learn outside of their community, and people are going to get smarter. Man, was I wrong.
Instead, the rednecks all connected with each other and started reinforcing each other.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess we're at the end of the show. It's interesting two things. One, you grew up in the age, I guess, I didn't think about this, but Satanic Panic. When you talked about Kiss, it just made me think of like you were right at the age when that was all hitting culture. It was in
the air for sure. And then we had to go to Catholic church. And then one day, this was crazy. My brothers and I, the 4 of us, just decided on the same day we weren't going to go anymore. My poor mom just waiting in the car for us to come out and get in, and we just learned, but maybe being 14 or something, where you just go, I don't like the way that makes me feel. It's creepy. I know that they're stories, and I am being told to be afraid, and I would rather sit here and keep watching cartoons or watch professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go and feel like that anymore. And I remember when I said it to my mom that way, she understood. And she stopped asking us to go. Before that, though, it was a heavy dose of that brainwashing, like the being afraid of anything that was antithetical to what they were teaching you got that dark. Like the believing that there was a force that operated on you called Satan. Man, it just seems so ridiculous now. But I remember when I had kids, I thought, well, I'll fail in very serious ways raising my kids, because everybody does. But then I thought, I'm not gonna make them afraid like that. That'll be a thing generationally that can improve. Like, I can allow them to believe the truth, which is no one's watching you, and no one's making a list and checking it twice. Like you have privacy, and you can be whoever you have an instinct to develop to be, and you're not going to hell. You're not going to heaven either, but you get to be here, and no one's peeking in on you when you think whatever thoughts you find yourself thinking. And that got heavy at the very end. Hey, thank you for these very considerate questions. I had a really good time thinking about this stuff on this call.
Yeah, I like I said, it's it's a pleasure to talk to you, but it's a pleasure to talk to people who make whether you consider my opinion worthy or not, good things.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You're right. Yeah. I'm just kidding. You're not. But as determined by our audience. I wish that were true, but we have some cool things coming out where I think you're going to, the group's still making stuff together, and I think everybody's just getting a little more confident. And I appreciate our audience so much. It's really small, but they sure do get the things we're trying to get across. And the way we were hoping to connect with our audience, we have. And, it's just big enough that they're going to let us keep making stuff. So, yeah. So the answer to that question is I appreciate it. I appreciate it a great deal. So thank you very much for taking the time to let me talk about our work.
Well, thanks again. And we'll see you next time, everyone. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.